Hi, welcome. This is Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail. Welcome. It's so great to have all of you tuning us in and turning us on. This is the Dr. Pat Show, and by now many of you have noticed that we have changed up our opening music, and more to come on that. Wow, we've got a great show for all of you today. You know, I want to talk about something. Benny, did you ever see the movie Minority Report? Do you remember seeing that with Tom Cruise?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That movie did more for the word precognition or precognitive or precog than I think any book that ever had been written on psychology or anything else.
Yeah, it seemed like it was like every fourth word they used.
Every fourth word. It was like, I don't even know the name of the characters that were in it, which is precog, right? But what it did, though, was it implanted, made us more aware of what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think also, you know, what happens with that is it makes us also aware. It makes us aware if we are walking and sleeping and dreaming and we have, let me call it a vision. Is that vision a vision of our past? Is it the present? Is it the future? What is it? What is it? But our fascination with dreams and dreamers and our fascination with waking up like I did the other day and say, OMG, I haven't had a dream about my stepmom who passed away. I hadn't had a dream about her like in 20 years. Like a real, like, wake me up dream about it. And lo and behold, we get to have a conversation with Eric Wargo, joining me here today. His book, Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self. How do we interpret the messages from our future? It's a fascinating book, but more than a book, you know, Eric's work is fascinating. And so outside of the realm of Hollywood and pop culture, what is it that fascinates us with dream work, but even more so fascinates us with the predictive so-called nature of it? Eric, it's great to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. Thank you for having me.
I do believe we have a fascination. I do believe
Absolutely.
that, and I'm talking about us as a society. Now, other cultures, they live and breathe by dream work.
Right.
What is it for you, though? What I want to know is about your journey, right? About who influenced you in this, and what was it in your life that tapped you on the shoulder, or maybe a 2x4, that said, wow, I think there's something to what just happened to me?
Right. The story of how I got interested in this is kind of a roundabout one. I guess I sort of mainly date it to a paper that was published exactly a decade ago by a very well-known psychologist at Cornell University named Daryl Bem. And this paper was not about dreams, but it was about the idea that people can feel their future, or what's called presentiment, and it's a version of precognition. He had put large numbers of undergraduates in these experiments where he sort of reversed the order of stimulus and response in a bunch of basic psychology type experiments, and discovered that he got statistically significant findings that these participants were pre-sponding to stimuli that they would encounter in the experiment later. And this was a mind-blowing finding, but for the field of psychology, it made so many people angry. There's such hostility in the field of psychology toward anything to do with ESP. I know. And we can get into the reasons for that. But and I happened at that time to be working as an editor at a psychology organization. It wasn't the organization that was publishing this paper, but I saw firsthand this hostility toward the topic of ESP. And it's not something that, it was something that I had been starting to think about anyway. I was kind of getting interested in the paranormal at that point in my life. And I had a sort of knee-jerk skepticism toward ESP that I think a lot of people who I grew up in a scientific household. My parents were psychologists. I was trained as a scientist, and I sort of had I kind of assumed that the skeptics, were right, that this is, ESP stands for error someplace. Yeah. It's somehow the product of faulty science, wishful thinking, superstition, and so on and so on. But this paper was like genuinely intriguing because it passed peer review. The experimental methods were sound. It was a large sample of people. It wasn't just 2 or 3 people. And seeing the hostility that it invited from scientists, people who are supposed to be inquiring into human nature, but in this case had a closed off attitude toward a really interesting finding. That kind of sparked me. I think when I see an underdog, I tend to want to, run to their rescue, and it seemed like bullying a little bit. And so it prompted me to do my due diligence and read up about the topic. And I really delved into the research on precognition after that point. But the funny thing is, and you say, what things in my own life? Well, reading about precognition, reading about precognitive dreams, I realized, I've had those, and I had one on the morning of 9/11 that I put in the book. I've had others and other kinds of precognitive experiences, not just dreams. And fortunately, I had for a couple decades at that point, I'd kept a detailed dream journal, so I was really able to confirm some of these things. So that led me to this topic, and I became sort of obsessed with it. And the more you pay attention to the possibility that your dreams are precognitive, the more you notice it happening. And gradually, the natural doubt that kind of creeps in when people have a paranormal experience of whatever kind, gradually those again and again and again precognitive dreams just kind of wore down my doubt, and so that's what led me to it. And then I published a book a couple of years ago on the topic, more in a theoretical and historical framework, but people just reached out to me after that with emails about their precognitive dreams. And I realized, okay, there needs to be a book, a guide to this topic, and to sort of debunk some of the myths around it, and so on.
I want to ask you this question because we're going to really dig deeper into this and into the book, because your book is really quite in-depth and also explains, what most people experience, but also, what the realm of psychology may suggest. I mean, it really is beautifully done. And yet at the same time, how many people do you know, or did I know, or how many people listening, to the show wake up one day and they have an experience? They, just like you mentioned, you had that experience, a precognition, a 9/11 precognition. How many of us wake up with those hits, let's call them, and just kind of blow them off? Like, I can't really be seeing that until after the event. And I want to talk to you about what happens sometimes when, we do have these visions. People don't know what to do, right? It's, am I crazy? What does it mean? And that's what today's show is about, Eric. That's what I want to talk with you about, is how do we interpret these? And I said this before when I was introducing you in the book. I had a dream about my stepmom about 2 or 3 nights ago, and I had not dreamt about my stepmom since her passing. And boy, wouldn't it have been great to sort of have you on the other end of the phone to say, what is this about? We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at how precognition shows up in our lives. Is it the same as prophesizing? Is it the same as a premonition? Is it the same as a psychic, intuitive knowing? And what is it that these messages are trying to tell us or even help us with? All of that is here. All of that is in the book. And we are also taking your questions. If you have comments, if you want to talk to Eric today, 1-800-930-2819. We're going to take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Want to talk about dreaming? You want to talk about, like, the goddess of all times?
Absolutely.
Everyone. Just saying that she is.
Couldn't agree more.
Oh my goodness. She was from another planet. She is from another planet in another world, and she is endless. Benny, good job, right? Where'd you dig that up from?
Oh man, it's over on the top part of it, not the bottom part.
My goodness, had a few dreams about her myself. Eric, thank you for joining me here today. Before we dig deeper into the book and the detail of the book, of course, I want folks to know, how can they get a copy of Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self, interpreting messages from your future, but also how can they find out about you and some of the things you're up to?
Sure, they can get the book from bookstores and from any online purveyor of books
yeah, exactly.
that you wish to patronize. And my blog is where they can learn more about the broader range of my interests and research in this larger area of consciousness and the paranormal and related areas. My blog is thenightshirt.com, all one word, as in the kind of garment one used to wear in olden times to bed.
That's right. Sometimes we still wear it. Sometimes we don't.
I used to have one. Yeah. I didn't look very good in it. It's not a flattering look. It's not a flattering look for a man. But
I don't know if any of us look good in the nightshirt. I think I could think of one picture or image of somebody in a nightshirt. Who was that? Oh, Charlize Theron. Maybe in a night. That was the best picture of a nightshirt. I want to start in the book, not sort of at the beginning. I want to start with the conversation that you have in the book about the law in the cosmos, because I would like to start there. And the reason I want to start there is because when we think about the cosmos, when we think about law, when we think about universal principles, there are some things that we know and some things we don't know. And even those things we do know, we have a really hard time connecting the dots. And I think in the book, this is one of the places you connect the dots. It must have been important to you to include part 4, the law of the cosmos in the book, for a lot of reasons. But is this a way to help people understand how to connect dots? I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yes, I think it is, but it's the most challenging part of this issue, and I'm sure you can agree, having read that. It's also, I think, the most necessary, because what you're referring to, part 4 of my book, which addresses premonitions and the thorny question of fate and free will, and whether there's the perennial question, okay, if precognitive dreaming is real, okay, I have a dream about getting in a plane tomorrow and it crashes, is that going to happen, or can I change that? And I think it's a myth that's been pervaded pretty much throughout the history of books on ESP and precognitive dreaming, dreamwork, is that, well, even though we can see the future in our dreams, that doesn't mean the future is fixed. We can always change our fate. We can change our, they just show us probabilities or whatever. And I think for a lot of reasons, and some of the reasons have to do with physics and physical law, I think that's a cop-out, really. that the physics says, since Einstein, physicists, cosmologists have kind of accepted that our sense of the future being open-ended and versus the past being fixed is kind of an illusion, that time is a dimension just like space, in which case the future really already exists and we're moving through it. We have this cognitive illusion that we're moving from one end to the other. But for most cosmologists, they have no trouble with the idea that, in fact, the future is already there. Now, what troubles people is, the idea, well, I can see something terrible in my future. That means I can't change it. Okay. And that's a perennial theme in classical myths like Oedipus or Macbeth or things like that. Well, the reality of precognitive dreams and precognition in general is not the way it's typically portrayed in art and literature. And, you're not going to have a video quality dream about a disaster in your future that you could avoid. Okay. That's one part of the answer to, people who are concerned about this topic. The second part is 9 times out of 10, you have a dream that seems to be about a disaster. And in fact, it turns out to be about something good. It was symbolic in some way.
Right.
Or or your dream kind of dramatized something relatively minor, some kind of minor mishap or upheaval in your life and made it into a big thing. Or a very common pattern with premonitions of disaster and death and so forth is that we have a dream that, you're in a car crash, and then you read about such a car crash tomorrow happening to someone else on the news, for instance. Yeah. So we have premonitions, but we don't know how they're going to come to pass. And while stories, alarming sounding stories of people, having premonitions of their own death or the death of loved ones, those do happen, but they're so the minority of precognitive dreams. Most dreams are bringing us, they're really telling us in one way or another about rewards ahead, even if they're couched in kind of disaster language. And that's part of the rules of symbolism that kind of govern how information from the future is able to reflux into the past and not cause some sort of paradox.
You know what, I want to ask you about this for a minute, because you said something and I just don't want to jump ahead. So what happens, correct me if I'm wrong, what happens is we have an event like that, whether it's a dream, my stepmom, it doesn't matter, but we have that. I'm a big daydreamer. Some people say that's not dreaming. I literally stop for a moment. Like this morning, I was sitting down with Linda right before the show, and I was attempting to eat breakfast, and I just stopped, and you could see the look in my face, like she's not here. right? And Linda said something like, what are you doing, right? And I didn't have an answer for her because I didn't think I was doing anything. But the thing you said that really, I've really noticed about myself, the mind wants to kick in and tell me that that dream I had is a precognition of disaster.
Yeah.
Right. But your book is here to help us to say, wait a minute, hit the pause button if you don't mind. You know, before you let the mind take over and put you in an event, you know, like the news this morning projecting a giant tsunami in Tacoma, Washington, you know, before you drop yourself in that story, there's got to be a way. And isn't that what you're helping us with throughout this book?
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicted, confused emotions around precognitive dreams. You know, the people's first reaction to it is like, oh, cool. And then second, but wait a minute. And then a lot of people, you know, shy away from the topic because they're like afraid of somehow dreaming about something terrible that they can't change or whatever. And I think this is a perennial anxiety, and it's the anxiety that myths like Oedipus and so forth were pointing to, that they were really dealing with this problem. Because for the ancients, you know, they had no problem with the idea that dreams sometimes do predict the future, oracles sometimes do predict the future, people go into trances while awake and predict the future, you know.
Right.
So there's this idea that somehow we're going to have this, go to sleep and have this horrible dream about something really terrible happening, and then it's going to happen that way. And that almost never happens. Like I said, those cases when people do have disaster premonitions, they always transpire in an unexpected way to someone else, or, you know, or they're sort of symbolic, and the actual event is different. But you know, you can see the connection once the event happens, but it's not the way you dream it. And, you know, you shouldn't always trust the emotions in your dreams. Very often, dreams about future events, I've found in my own work and in other dream workers that I work with, that sometimes, particularly long distance, powerful precognitive dreams about events far ahead in your life, they often manifest as nightmares or as having a very dark feeling to them. And then when they transpire, no, it was something amazing. Yeah. And I think that there's some feature about the way information reaches us in the past that our, I don't know, our emotional circuitry doesn't interpret it correctly, or something about our cognition doesn't interpret it correctly. But there's another one of the other mental health consequences of precognitive dreaming is having a dream that you didn't realize was a premonition, but then something bad happens, you know,
right,
a loved one dies, and you realize, oh my gosh, I dreamed about this. And if I dreamed about it, I should have been able to do something.
Exactly.
I should have done something. So people feel all this guilt. Right. And for exactly the same reasons that I was just discussing, you should never feel guilty about that. Yeah. Because had the event not happened, you would not have had the dream. There's a grandfather, again, there's that grandfather paradox rule going on, that really the idea of fate as something immutable really is a reassurance to people who have a lot of premonitions and so on, because it assures them that, no, it's actually not my fault. You know, there's nothing I could have done to change that outcome, because the way I received the information I was not intended to get a warning. It's not like I wasn't on the ball and I should have gotten this warning. People have this idea that somehow dreams are sent to us by some smarter person up there in my you know, unconscious, or, you know, in some other realm, you know, who's, you know, and we're failing to live up to their requests, and failing to heed their warnings.
On a day-to-day basis.
That's not the way it works. And that's not the way it works.
Failing on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
We're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we've just talked about, for those of you just tuning in, we've just talked about the many, many ways we either conceive, misconceive, interpret or misinterpret, do or not do with the dreams that we get. You might call them visions, you might call them dreams. Let's call them insights. We've just talked about all the many ways we get so confused, so mixed up, so guilted, so shamed. When we come back, we're going to talk with Eric about what do we do? What do I do with that dream thing that happened with the mama? What do I do with that? Is there anything for me to do? How do I not step into the rabbit hole and slide all the way down, making my own little story up about what Mama Doris was trying to say to me? Let's take a short break, everybody. When we come back, I have a copy of the book to give away, Benny. Much more with Eric. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're talking about precognitive dreamwork and the long self, interpreting messages from your future with incredible author Eric Wargo, especially the author of Time Loops as well. And Eric, before we talk about, look, we've just talked about all the things that we could literally drop in a basket and not have go so well with dreams. We're going to talk about what do we do with them. But before we do that, how do we find out about you? How do we get a copy of the book?
Right. The book is available from bookstores, and it is available from any online bookseller. And the title is Precognitive Dreamwork and the Long Self. I also have a blog, thenightshirt.com, all one word, the nightshirt. And that's where I write about these topics and a lot of related concerns.
Yeah. And there's a lot of information in the blog too. And so, we have 1 hour to really condense a book that is so filled with information. And so I love when people can connect with you on a regular basis. Benny, let's give a copy of the book away if we could. 1-800-930-2819. Let's go ahead and do that. Eric, look, we've talked a little bit about sort of the ups and downs, especially in my field, psychology. And we've talked about different versions of what our pop culture would like us to believe about dream work or precognitive. Or now let's talk about, here we are, and I'm waking up today, and out, it's like my mind, my visualization has this precognitive dream. Most people don't know what to do the minute after that happens. And I think that's what you're doing here, is you're helping us with that next step. Sometimes we never have the dream again. Other times people will go to bed the next day and it will stay with them. This is where you come in. What have you learned? What can we help people with when they get a dream like that? Or maybe you're like me. Maybe you're sitting trying to eat a couple of eggs and all of a sudden you get something in your sight. Tell us, where do we go from that dream?
Yeah, well, first, let me say that you never know a dream is precognitive until the event that it's precognizing happens. So when you wake up with a dream, you don't know necessarily what that dream is. Now, some people will have dreams that, oh wow, that feels, I'm sure something is going to happen, and they may be right. But one of the myths that I try to debunk in the book is the myth that precognitive dreams or premonitions or whatever always feel numinous, or they feel special somehow. And that is not the case. And this is why the number one step in precognitive dream work, it's very simple, and there's really 3 steps. But the first is write down all your dreams when you wake up, as much as you can remember. In fact, we dream throughout the night, and what we remember when we wake up is probably a small fraction of that. So most of it's gone. Don't worry about that.
Right.
But write down everything you can in detail, as much detail as you can, about every dream that you can remember, even if it's just a fragment of a dream or just an image or a setting or something like that. Write down what you can remember, because you don't know what's going to turn out to have precognitive significance later. The third step, we'll come back to the second step later, but the third step to precognitive dream work is then going back to your dream records at the end of every day. Now, this is the thing. A lot of people are interested in dreams. A lot of people write down their dreams. No one thinks to go back to those dream records after a short amount of time.
Nope, we don't.
Right. And this is what will, this is how you detect a precognitive dream, is you open your dream records at night. Forget about your dream during the day. You don't need to think about it during the day. But at night, open before you go to bed or whatever, look at your dream record and just think about the events of that day, and if anything kind of seems to connect to the events of the interim. And in fact, go back through your dream records from the last few days. I recommend 3. That's kind of an arbitrary number. You're most likely to detect a precognitive dream unfolding in the next few days after your dream. Like, wow, 2 days seems to be kind of almost a sweet spot for me. Wow. But not necessarily. Some dreams, target events farther out in the future. Some target events exactly a year or multiple years in the future. This is something called calendrical resonance that I talk about in the book. But by and large, if you want to make as much headway in a short amount of time as possible, getting some precognitive dream hits, go back to your dream records from the last 3 days at the end of every day. Just look at what you wrote down from your dreams and just reflect on them. Reflect on what happened in that interim, and see what you find. Now, we can talk about the second step, free association, later if you want, or we can talk about it now.
I want to talk about it now.
Okay.
Because one of the things I want to keep this rolling, because first of all, it's insightful, but 2, I like to make sure that, first of all, we have the best audience on the planet, and they're amazing. And what I have to make sure that I do is provide them with things they can use every day. And what you just shared is, I think, little known information about that. We hear so often, oh, you're going to get one chance to remember your dream. Oh, there's so many things we hear, but what you just described is pretty much what happens, to me. That moment on the couch didn't mean that was the first time I got that hit. I think I was being reminded to remember it, but what to do with it is really so important now. I would like you to continue.
Right. Well, let me say that those steps that I just gave you, steps 1 and step 3 for me, were actually, they're not anything I came up with. This was the pioneer of precognitive dream work. He didn't call it that, but it's what it was an English English aviation engineer, plane designer, back in the first decades of the 20th century, named J.W. Dunn, John William Dunn. And he was also a precognitive dreamer. And he was perplexed by these dreams he had that came true usually within a couple of days. And he wanted to understand them. And he brought his engineer's mind to being systematic about studying these things in his life. And what he hit on, which he invited his readers. He wrote a book in 1927 called An Experiment with Time. It was actually a big bestseller. It was very popular and influential for, throughout the middle of the century. It influenced a lot of famous writers and stuff. He invited readers to do what I'm inviting readers to do, which is keep a dream journal and go back to your dream records after a couple of days. Now, and he fills the book with tons of examples of this. Of precognitive dreams that manifested in his life, and then he has a lot of theories about how it works. Now, he was writing at a time when the theories of Sigmund Freud were dominant in culture. I mean, everyone was reading Freud. Everyone was interpreting their dreams according to Freudian free association and so forth. But he didn't occur to, and Dunn was well aware of Freud, and he didn't see any conflict between Freud's ideas and his, but he didn't put the two together. And basically what he was looking for in his dreams were obvious, very obvious, clear connections to an event in his future. So something, like his famous example is he dreams he's on a volcanic island and it's about to blow, and he's trying to warn people, and then the number, a certain number goes through his head in the dream, and then a few days later he reads the newspaper about a major volcanic eruption in the Caribbean with that exact number or a similar number of dead from the eruption. Wow. So things like that, obvious, connections between the dream and the event. What I have found, and other dream workers find, is that most precognitive dreams are not literal representations of a future experience or a future event. They're distorted in various ways, and they have a lot of symbolism and a lot of substitutions and puns and things like that. And these are the kinds of things that really interested Freud. He didn't believe in precognition in dreams, but he did know, and he did explain how to interpret them, you really need to free associate on them. And what that means, that it's not an esoteric exercise. All it means is saying, well, for this particular element in the dream, like this character in the dream or whatever, what's the first thing it reminds you of? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Don't put effort into it. Just, what's the first thing that your first association that comes up, or first association or two associations that come up? Well, step 2 of precognitive dream work, as I'm formulating it, is when you write your dream down in the morning, sit within a minute and free associate on all of its elements and write down those associations next to the dream. So you have a dream about your stepmother. Right. Well, that's a you probably have a million associations with her, but like you have a dream about a student, in school that you haven't seen in, 30 years or something like that. What's your first association to that person? Or there's a certain object or a certain setting. Dreams are always take place in a certain setting. What's your association to that setting? Write down those associations. Just what are the things that this reminds me of? And if it doesn't remind you of anything, don't force it.
Well, let me just comment on that for a minute, because let me tell you, this dream about my stepmom was very unusual. It was my stepmom almost in a Mortal Kombat sort of role, fending off multiple knives and blades, right? And when you were just talking about that now, and I go to my free association, my stepmom was a protector. She was a fierce, whether it was injustice in the world, right? You could see her as a Mortal Kombat character, right? Or you could see her. What I didn't see her as was sort of a kung fu master person. So when you talk about interpretations or associations, it just clicked right now for me, right? Because no, I don't see my mom as like Mortal Kombat genius. But if I start to do it, I could come up with image of what that meant.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's often those associations that you're going to notice the connection to an event or an experience unfolding over the next few days or a couple weeks or whatever. So this is why this added step to what J.W. Dunn formulated 90 years ago or whatever now, that's really takes it up a notch in terms of your ability to detect precognitive dreams and to understand how precognitive dreams were working, how they're processing information that's refluxing from your future. It's somehow that information is getting distorted, twisted, but there's always a rationale to it. So those are the 3 steps, and you can start tomorrow. And honestly, you said that you're not someone who always remembers your dreams. In fact, just putting a notebook and a pen by the side of your bed will prime the pump. I mean, it really, people find that, well, I never dream, or I never remember my dreams. Just put a notebook there. It acts kind of like setting an intention, and you'll probably wake up with a nice dream. It's like, oh, okay. and so that's the perfect, way to begin the wonderful life adventure of precognitive dream work, is just buy a nice notebook and pen and set it by your bedside.
I love this. I want to talk to you about something, and you allude to it in the book, and I can't remember where, but I grew up as a kid that I would go to bed at night. I'm just huge sci-fi kid from birth, I think, just was fascinated by really interesting, strange, weird sci-fi things, right? Movies all the time, whatever it was. But, it was really interesting. I had a collective of all of these characters. It could have been Godzilla one day. It could have been the Colossus. It didn't matter. But one of the things I started to do as a kid is I started to create my dreams before I dreamt. And what I mean is, and I thought about that. And as I was reading your book, I thought, well, did I really do that? Or did the dream come to me and I thought I was creating my dream? Can you see how the lines get blurred? And can you talk to how we sift through that, so to speak?
Yeah, the lines are very blurry, and there are a lot of kinds of dreaming. I focused the book mostly, except for a couple of chapters at the end. I really wanted to focus it on the kinds of dreams that most people are aware of having, just typical nocturnal dreams. But yeah, that edge of sleep phenomenon. First of all, what you're describing sounds a lot like what I did as a teen, which was kind of what I think, in hindsight, I hadn't read Jung, of course, as a teen, but I think in hindsight, I was engaged in active imagination, what a Jungian would call active imagination. And that's, I think, what you're describing. And in fact, one of the super precognitive dream workers in my book, her name is Toby. She, amazing story, and shared, just incredible precognitive dreams with me. That's her main form of dreaming, actually. She finds it much more interesting to engage with the dream world during waking. Now, it's not something that comes easily for a lot of people. It depends. Some people are just naturally slip into that trance, like you're describing, and can go to another place. And some people use it creatively and will get stories and things like that. Other people don't have such a facility with doing that, at least not as adults. I think it's something that we probably all are better able to do when we're kids or teens, like me, and I kind of aged out of it, and I find it difficult to do as an adult. But it's definitely part of the spectrum of dream phenomena. And yes, if you can engage that kind of dream world in waking life, then all the same rules apply, and maybe even different rules. I don't know. It's not an area I've explored as much, but some precognitive dream workers who do that are exploring it right now. And so, maybe we'll see. Maybe in years to come, we'll have more principles, governing precognition and how it works in waking life. But not only that, there's also hypnagogic states and hypnopompic states at the edge of sleep. These are very rich for precognitive exploration. They present certain challenges. It's very hard to rouse yourself from, especially hypnagogic image, as you're slipping into sleep, because it feels so good to be falling asleep that you just don't want to get up and write it down. That's the last thing you want to do. But when you have the discipline to do that, boy, those images are very often will pay off within a couple of days. This is this is what I saw. Boy, in that
it's so funny you're talking about this. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I got to mention it. It's something to think about. I work with Mary Jane Mack, one of our other hosts, and she suggested I get a device called Brain Tap. Now, if you go look at it, it looks like you put a headphone on, but it is that, I don't want to call it total hypnotic state, but you are getting these subliminal messages. It takes you to a place where you can come and relax. But for somebody like me, what I've noticed with it, I do a couple of the Brain Tap, I don't exercises or these hypnotic things. Some of them are enchanted, whatever they are. And I will tell you that what I've noticed about them, and you just helped me with this, is that I'm like coming out of it, I'm not sleeping, and I will get up and I will walk in. I did this a couple of weeks ago, and I walk into Linda and said, oh my God, I got the best idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, are these type of things, some people are more prone to have things activated by them. But the point is this information is available to us. And I think what you're helping us with is it's available to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, maybe you're using a brain tap, maybe you're not. But isn't that really the key underpinning of what you're inviting people to explore, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, talking about the spectrum of dreaming, honestly, I think, and this is where my research actually has taken me in more recent years since I wrote this book. I'm really more interested in creativity. And in fact, I think creativity is precognition. I think
with you.
Our original ideas, those ideas that come to us unbidden, often in a sort of trance-like state or at the edge of sleep or you know, standing in the shower and suddenly the solution happens, that eureka moment. I think that is actually a form of precognition. And there's so many examples of this in the arts and in you know, writers and artists of all kinds, you know, having some kind of, you know, inspiration for a novel, which then or work of art that then unfolds in their life. I mean, it's so prevalent that I think that this is not just an aberration or a neat little nifty feature of creativity. I think it is what creativity is. And so that's what I'm working on now. There's a bit on that on my blog on that. But yeah,
it's an exciting field.
Yes.
I want to just comment for a minute. I mean, this is really, okay, we overuse leading edge, but this is really important because we all talk about being a fast-paced world, not being able to keep up. And we leave out the fact that even though the world is fast-paced, we still have these abilities. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a population of people that think, I am on my phone, I'm testing, that's not for me. And I think that is a grave misunderstanding and injustice for people, right?
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear about your work on creativity, and I hope you'll come back.
I'd love to.
I'm telling you, sometimes you get ideas and sometimes you know what to do with them and sometimes you don't. And I think your book helps us be a safe place, a safe haven for people to say, I'm not crazy. I'm not insane about this.
And it's
Eric,
a jump.
Thank you. Yeah. What's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today?
Oh, my personal message is, you know, you, whoever you are out there in internet land or radio land, you are an amazing object in the universe. You are a four-dimensional, vast creature, and when you start exploring your dreams, you start to realize that, you know, your past, you may think it's dead and gone, and you may think the future has no relevance. No, it's all connected. It's all connected. And not only are you in touch with your future on a nightly basis, your future experiences are already in your head, I believe. And read the book and you'll find out why. But an extension of that is your experiences today. If you're having a powerful experience or emotional experience today, it influenced you in your past, maybe even in childhood. Think about that, and think about how to, you know.
That is a great point to leave us with, because that's going to be with me for a while. Eric, thank you so much for today. Thank all of you for tuning us in, turning us on. Benny pushing all the right buttons. All of you out there, remember that this is, again, an invitation to really tap into the creative genius that you are. It is beautifully done by Eric. The book is so well written and easy to relate to. I hope you all find your meaning, your precognitive ability. We'll see you next time.